Okay. Dang. Feels a little bit more intimate to stare at my guest. So usually, because I only have one camera,
Yeah.
I usually have to sit on the same bench looking at the
Oh,
camera.
that's fun.
And then the problem that arises is, do I look at the camera or do I look at you? So then the guest kind of has like an awkward dance. But I'm so used to filming podcasts not staring directly into your eyes that I feel a little, wow,
weird.
this is like, we're like on a date or something.
That's crazy.
But I will address the audience while I do the introduction. Welcome back to the show, Respectfully Inspired with Aussie Films. Today I'm here with my guest, Tanner Lauzon.
Lauzon. It's okay.
He is a new new author as of a couple days ago. His book, A Modern Screwtape Letters, which is a remake of the classic C.S. Lewis book, Screwtape Letters. And today we're going to sit down and talk about that along with whatever else arises. Go ahead and introduce yourself. You can address the audience, and then for the rest of the conversation, look over here.
Yeah, what's up? My name's Tanner Lauzon. I fell in love with writing about 3 years ago in literature and philosophy, and I just felt like there needed to be a modern version of this book because it was so profound when I first read it, and I just love philosophy so much, and I feel like it's just a dead language, and it needs to be brought back because we've literally been indoctrinated not to think for ourselves and to learn for ourselves and search truth for ourselves. And so that's kind of why I do what I do, is just to hopefully inspire people to seek truth on their own and find what they believe on their own. Yeah.
Let's start off just because your tattoos are appearing in my face. Do you have a favorite one?
Oh, goodness. I think I just got this one for my birthday, actually.
Yeah.
And I always wanted, when I first got tattoos, number one, I never wanted tattoos. And then I got them. And I remember when I first saw my friends' tattoos, they all came towards a story. And when I got my first one, I was like, God, I really want them all to have a story.
Yeah.
And so I had all of them except for this one in my notes app folder. And I told myself, I asked God, I was like, make sure they all come together, but I feel like they're all supposed to be on my body at one point.
Yeah.
And they all meant different things, but when I got this one, I was designing it.
Yeah.
And at the tattoo shop on my birthday. And as I was drawing the clouds, if you can't see it, it's a face with clouds over the eyes. And so when I got it, it put everything together. So it shows how we're blinded by religion and by sin when we look when we look at the world without the lens of Jesus, without truth, then we're blinded by the world and we're blinded by sin. And so it's like a cloud of deceit. And that's like actually a huge portion of the book is identifying cloud of deceit and seeing that there's actually, we've been lied to our whole lives to make our own truth. But if there's all of these different truths, then there's no such thing as truth at all.
Yeah.
Like if you have your own truth, if I have my own truth, that doesn't mean there's truth. The word truth means absolute. And so with it, it's to show that when we go our own ways and follow our own ideologies, then we'll see Jesus, which this is Jesus holding us wrongly, and we won't be looking at him. But when we turn, because her face is looking that way, when we turn and look at him, we'll see that he's been trying to hold us the whole time. And so with that, all of them go together with that, just different parts of my story.
Yeah, that's so interesting about the truth being relative. I think it's pretty rare in America, at least, to be a straight up atheist. Almost no one I know is a straight up atheist, and almost everyone I know believes in God.
Yeah.
But they'll justify their belief in God based on their experiences. So they'll be like, oh, I know God is real because on this day this thing happened to me, or like all things have just come together in my life perfectly.
Yeah.
And something that pushed me back to Jesus was like, when I was considering that, I guess, spiritual God that's kind of the most prevalent in America right now, that God is essentially just an extension of the person's thoughts because it can't disagree with them.
Yeah.
The God just, if you ask him like, oh, why is God, how do you know that God is what you think he is?
Yeah.
And they'll tell you, oh, because of my experiences. Yeah. And then, but if God is just your experiences and he can't disagree with you, then you might as well just look in a mirror because it's just...
Then you are your own God.
Yeah, and that was, even like before I was so deep on Jesus, I feel like it's really important to identify that, like, and as Christians, we believe in relationship, not in religion, but even religion's better explanation for God than that, because that's not an explanation. If God can't disagree with you, then that's you.
Yeah.
You don't disagree with you.
Literally.
And the only way you do disagree with you is when you look at something, in our case, the Bible, and you go, oh, wait, I might not understand this yet, but clearly I'm not up to this standard. And so if I think the God in here is the God, he clearly disagrees with me. I don't know. That's deep, but
yeah,
think about that a lot. I want to ask you, in this book, it's written in such a way where the beginnings of sentences don't have capital letters. It almost feels like there's periods in the middle of sentences, very not written in, I guess, regular English.
Yeah.
What is the reason for that?
Yeah. I've genuinely been waiting for someone to ask me this question because when my editor was going through it, she's like, are you sure you want to have it uncapitalized? I was like, yes, that's the first thing I want. Yeah. And it's because we were taught to capitalize things. It wasn't a thing until the 1500s. And so even looking at other like prior literature before the 1500s, it wasn't a thing. And so in my head, I'm like, why would I, even with my own writings, fall into a lie that society has brought forth? Like, it's just another rule that we were put to do for no reason. There's really no reason for us to capitalize other than some random person told us that it was the next thing. And so in my head, it's, I did it that way because I'm like, I'm not following the ways of this world. I'm not going to believe in a system of lies and literally go the ways that everyone else tells me to go. I'm going to find truth on my own. And so with that, I believe it starts with every single thing you do.
Okay. That was not the answer I was expecting, which is really interesting. So I would love to check out a book from the pre-1500s to look at that. In the book, in the original Screwtape Letters, C.S. Lewis is very careful to only I believe he capitalizes the beginning of the sentences.
He does.
But when he's referring to God in any other word besides God, he, him, all the time, he capitalizes he, him. Anything that represents God, he capitalizes. And anything that is not God, he lowercases. And that was clearly intentional because he was trying to say there's one real God and everything else is below that. In the Bible, when they talk about gods that aren't Jesus, it's always lowercase. And so I thought it was going to be some sort of extension of that. But the fact that it's more to get back to traditional writing is quite interesting.
Yeah, that is also a portion of it because that's where I was going with it is I believe the only word that should be capitalized is God, or in this sense in the book, God is pronounced as light most of the time. And so it gives you a capital L for light or stuff of that sort. And it always goes back to show that there has to be one truth. And so in my head, it's a spin-off of all of that. If I capitalize other letters, then I'm in my own way going and saying that there's other truths. And I know that sounds kind of complex, but
it's super dogmatic, but I respect it because you're staying true to yourself. What about names? How do you feel like?
They're all lowercase. Besides the demon who writes the letters, he capitalizes his name, the entire name. So his name is Havoc, and I did that because of his pride. He wants to be like God. So he put his name in all capitals because he wants to be like God, but he doesn't even put his own brother's name in capitals. And so he's very prideful and arrogant about his own ways. but he doesn't even believe in the mission entirely because it's all about what he does and what he wants to do.
Wow, that's good. That's really interesting. So, unfortunately, I haven't read the book yet because it literally came out 2 days ago.
Yeah.
Share some of your concepts. I'll spark your, I mean, obviously you remember them, but I'll spark your brain by sharing one of my favorite concepts from Screwtape Letters. He was talking about how anger and resentment aren't created equally. So, like, if you say, like, oh, I hate Nazis, or versus I hate my mom. Me to say I hate Nazis, I know what the Nazis are. I know they're the Germany army that killed the Jews.
Yeah.
But I've never met a Nazi. For all intensive purposes, they are like a figment of my imagination.
Yeah.
So my hatred toward Nazis isn't that real.
Yeah.
So in the Screwtape Letters, he talks about the enemy would much rather have you hate someone in your house and your family because that anger is so real and tangible.
Yeah.
Rather than being like a figment of your imagination there, which I thought was very interesting. Another interesting concept was the demons start celebrating when they're patient. So in the book, just so you guys know, you're going to need to know it for this book too. Both concepts of the Screwtape Letters and the modern day Screwtape Letters is that it's one demon in hell who has like a higher rank is writing to another demon to help him trick his patient into not finding God, finding Jesus.
Yeah.
And in the original Screwtape Letters, when the patient goes to war, the demons start celebrating. They're celebrating because they're so excited that he's suffering.
Yeah.
But the wiser, feels wrong to call a demon wiser, but the smarter demon basically condemns the stupider demon, saying it's not good that he's going to war because a lot of people come to God in their suffering, which is very true. Sure, I came to God in my suffering. I'm sure you probably as well. So outline a couple fresh concepts in this book.
Yeah. So a big notion that I brought forth in this, and it starts from the very beginning, is the thought that God is light.
Yeah.
And so with that, why I do that, or truth is light, why I do that is because in physics, darkness is the absence of light. There's no such thing as less darkness. There's no such thing as more darkness. There's either darkness or there's light. And so with it, you either have light or you have absence of light. And so with it, there are all of these in the book. What I believe has happened in our society is we have believed that there's dimmed lights, and we believe that there's other lights in this world, and so we follow them. So a big problem that you see in the book is the patient follows things like social media as one of his lights. There's this new light that we have that C.S. Lewis didn't have, where we are consumed by our phones and we are addicted to what's in front of us. And with that comes fames, fortunes, fames and fortunes.
Yeah.
Is primarily from this dimmed light and their sense. And the demon talks about how if you get the dimmed light in front of his eyes, he'll never turn around to see the rays of the real light behind him. And how the rays of the real light have been warming him the entire time. But since he's so captivated by the thing that's right in front of his face, which the demons put in front of his face, he'll never see the light behind him.
Bro, that's so good.
Yeah.
That's so good. What do you think? So in the Bible, it talks about like us being a light on top of a hill.
Yeah.
So from my understanding of the Bible, we do become lights as, I guess, the Holy Spirit comes in us, and now we become a light for that.
Yeah.
I don't know where my thought here is, but I guess my thought is like turning to humans is bad too, to like, idolize humans.
Yeah.
But humans also can hold the light.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting juxtaposition with your...
Yeah. So what's intriguing is there's actually a chapter where the patient is in this communal relationship with a girl.
Yeah.
And she is a little light. She is a Christian.
Yeah.
And she's telling him about truth, and the demon starts talking about how to get him to look at her as light instead of to realize that she has light inside of her. And so with that, it's this presupposition that he will fixate on her. And what I love about it is, if you've read the Bible, you'll see I'll do little spin-offs of biblical references. So in that one, it says, make her his patience, make her his kindness, make her his long-suffering. And it relates to 1 Corinthians 13, where love is patient, love is kind, love endures all things, love hopes all things. And it makes her love in his eyes instead of seeing her as a mirror for love.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so good, because that is what we are. I think the way, I believe this is what our understanding of the moon is, that the moon actually doesn't have light, but it reflects the light of the sun, and therefore it's able to light up some of the earth at night just because of the sun's light. And we are supposed to be kind of like that for Christ. We're supposed to, he lights us up, and then we light others up because of his light, though. We're nothing without his light. And in a sense, it's almost like looking at the moon, glorifying the moon, rather than understanding that the sun's bright, which both are bad in the case of God, because things God made.
They'll die one day too.
Actually, there's a really interesting Bible verse I just memorized that is Deuteronomy 17:3. It says, "For instance, they might serve other gods or worship the sun, the moon, or any of the stars, the forces of heaven, which are strictly forbidden." So for those star people, it is in there.
Sorry.
It is in there.
That's so fun.
And I did actually want to cover something. I wanted to go in the book first, so it's kind of a loop back around. But the Bible says, in English translations, it says something about not having tattoos.
Yeah.
But I know there's some sort of explanation. I've never really looked into it because I've never had tattoos.
Yeah.
But could you go, explain that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So the verses, I think it's Leviticus, it's either 19 or 26.
Yeah.
I could be wrong about both of those, but that's what I remember it as. And with it, it says, do not get tattoos for the dead. And so something prominent, I grew up on a native reservation.
Oh,
and so,
really?
Yeah. I'm white, if you can't tell.
We'll have to get into that.
Yeah, that's story for another time, but.
Oh, no, I think it's for this time.
Well, that a lot of new age stuff, a lot of spiritual stuff, but with it, not on my reservation. Some actually, a good amount of people on my reservation got Native American tattoos. And this is not a dog to my homeboys back home. Like, I love you all so much. It's not a dog to your guys' tattoos, but a lot of people back in the day would get tattoos towards their God.
Yeah.
And they would get tattoos for their God resembling what their gods are. So a big thing that I was taught to believe growing up is, like, if we bless the land, then the gods of the land, like the god of salmon, the gods of bears, of orcas, they will all bless us. Wow. And so, that's what I learned.
That's a wild child.
Yeah. And so with it, they would get tattoos to remember what their gods are doing. And so Israel, what they would do is every time God would do something for them, they would set up a pillar of remembrance. And so every time they would walk back through the wilderness or through these paths, they would have these remembrances. And that's a huge reason why we have the Bible, is because Israel, the Israelites, the Jews, would remember what happened. But what other congregations and other religions and ideologies would do is they would get tattoos on their bodies for the gods, saying that they're going to serve their God forever, because in their eyes, a tattoo is permanent. And so that's where the discretion is it's like, hey, if you're getting being real here, if you're getting a tattoo for astrology, that's another god. Yeah. And that thing will die. And so that's where, if you have one, pray about it. Yeah. I would say get it removed. That's me. Because I used to do astrology and stuff like that.
I appreciate you for giving such an in-depth explanation, because I've heard the explanation. I've asked the question before. But I know that a lot of Christians probably are just wondering, and they like to hear it from someone who's wise.
I got a few.
Clearly you're wise on that. So thank you for explaining that.
Yeah, of course.
There was a lot you just revealed to me there. I think this is fun because I don't know you.
Yeah, this is our first time meeting.
First of all, I got to ask, why did you grow up on an Indian reservation?
Yeah. So my mom immigrated from Canada to America just for a better life. And not that Canada is not awesome. I would live in Canada, but just she was a runner and she really wanted to run in America where there's you can prosper more, and just Team USA is a lot better than Team Canada and the events she wanted to do. and she ended up meeting my dad. And with that, Native American reservations are predominantly more impoverished, so it's easier to live on them or by them because it costs less to live there. And so how it works is I grew up in a town called Marysville, and then the tribe is Tulalip.
What
and so
state?
Washington State.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and so I grew up, my house was in Marysville, but all my schooling was in Tulalip, and everything I did was in Tulalip, because it's a longer story, but I grew up a very, very bad kid. I got expelled from first grade from punching a girl.
Oh, you punched a female?
Yeah,
Oh,
but
gosh.
anyway, I punched a few people before that. I got in fights a lot.
Yeah.
But with the girl, she tried to kiss me. So it was kind of her fault.
Okay. It was her role.
Yeah. That one, I think I should have got expelled before that, but I don't think I should have
You should give some context to that.
Okay.
Well,
so obviously I was 6 years old. I thought girls had cooties.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And her friend held me to try to get her to kiss me. And so I pushed her friend off and I punched her in the stomach because I had anger issues. And then she came up and tried to kiss me, so I punched her in the face.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
That's super.
Redemption.
That is super
I haven't
deep.
punched a girl since. Just to let you guys know.
Well, that's the power of the gospel.
Yeah.
So, should we wrap it up?
Yeah, I guess that's it.
Wow. But actually, I did jump ahead, and I do want to keep on this path.
Yeah.
But I feel bad. This is a bad podcast host. I should have caught this earlier. But that idea of the remembrance, having the Bible. You on another podcast had talked about circular versus linear. In America, we move very linear. So my understanding of what you were saying is that we get an accomplishment. Let's say we get our dream job. I start doing podcasts, and then I go, I want to get a bigger guest, or I want to get a better studio, or I want to go up. And along the way, we rarely circle back to be like, remember when I was filming podcasts outside? Remember when I was doing this? And in the Bible, that was, God would tell the Jews to stop. Yeah. The Israelites, probably shouldn't call them Jews. He would tell the Israelites to stop and make an altar. Sometimes he would just say, grab rocks from the river and stack them up. And then whenever your kids walk by this stack of rocks, it will remind you of how I saved you, how I parted this river, how I parted the Dead Sea. And so in their culture, they began to live in such a way where they're constantly reminding themselves of what God did for them. Yeah. And you were talking about this, and you said every morning you wake up and you get on your knees and pray to God, and you remind yourself of what God does for you. And I was like, wow, I seriously, on the drive here, I was like, that's awesome. That's good stuff. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, bro. Yeah, bro, I always say this as a joke. I don't know if I've never shared it on a podcast, but I would so marry a Messianic Jew because of the culture. Like, they know so much about the Bible that we don't know because we don't read it in Hebrew, or because they've been taught things over generations about the Bible that we don't even know, like the Torah. They know so much about God that we don't know because of it. And why I say that is Jews, even to this day, they have all of these feasts throughout the year, like hundreds, I believe. I could be wrong, but they used to have hundreds. I don't know if a lot of them still do, if a lot of them practice them, but I know they practice the primary ones. Yeah. And with that, it brings forth a remembrance of what God has done. Yeah. And in my head, we would not have history if there wasn't remembrance. Yeah. Like, we wouldn't know anything if we didn't have any remembrance of it, because before writing was a thing, it was all verbal. And so with them, they would do all of these things to remember. And I think about, you're right, like in America, we're taught, okay, oh man, I just hit 50,000 on social media. Let's get to 60,000. Oh, I just hit 60,000. Let's get up 100K. And with that, you become so numb to what's happening that you don't realize that God has been answering your prayers all along. And then the one moment where something doesn't get answered, you blame God and say that it's his fault. And it's because we're looking at what we want in our linear thinking, and we don't realize that when we think linearly, we're making our own truths. Yeah. Because we're saying, okay, this is the next thing, instead of, hey, God, you saved me, you delivered me, you'll save me and deliver me again. Because that's what they always did. They always went back. Like, even when they kept falling into different ideologies and judges, a judge would be raised up and the judge would deliver them And then
Yeah.
they would turn back and they'd be like, oh my goodness, we've been missing it. We forgot what we were told from the start.
Wow.
And they would always come back to one truth and one way.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dude, that's so good. Just for the audience, and for my own clarification, a Messianic Jew is a Jewish person that believes in Christ.
Yeah. So they believe in Jesus, that Jesus is God and that he died for us.
So this is really interesting you bring this up because my primary heritage is German.
Okay.
I don't look German.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't know why. I actually think it's because I have Native American in me. But,
oh, cool.
my dad looks more like you than me.
That's fine.
And he had the same sort of revelation you had. And he has been leaning every Friday to Saturday the same way like the Jews celebrate Sabbath. My dad celebrates Sabbath not in the way they do it where they can't walk and they but he sings these like Jewish songs in Hebrew. My dad doesn't even speak Hebrew. He just does it because of like what you identified. And actually he's flew to Oklahoma to partake in there's like a tribe of Messianic Jews that do those dinners you talk about. And my dad goes there and does them with him. My mom thinks it's weird. My mom's like, why are you doing these Hebrew traditions, even though she's also Christian? But my dad does it because he's identified what you identified is that they
know something.
They know so much. And Jesus himself was, I guess he's a Messianic Jew. He believes in himself. But he was a Jew and he did follow it. He just... I think people forget that he followed it because he called out all the Pharisees, which is really interesting. There was one more thing I want to say about that. I'm blanking. Oh, yeah. So, very interesting study. The Torah. The Torah is the first 7 books of the Bible, right?
First 5.
First 5 books. Yeah. In the Torah, there's a very interesting fact that's so powerful for the validity of the scriptures that, like, my dad's told me, but I don't hear it talked about that often. But in the first 2 books of the Torah, which these are long books with like 30 plus chapters, every 50 letters, it spells, wait, I need to make sure I don't mess this up. Okay, so in Hebrew scripture, they didn't have vowels back in the time. So the words weren't spelled the way we would spell them, but basically for every 50 letters in the first 2 books of the Torah, it would spell T-R-H or whatever Torah is without the vowels. It would say T-R-H, T-R-H, T-R-H for tens of thousands of characters. It would never break. It would go T-R-H, T-R-H. Tens of thousands for the first 2 books. In the 3rd book, it didn't do that. In the 4th book, it was reversed. So HRT, 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 HRT. So the first 2 books for like tens of thousands of characters go Torah. The last 2 books go backwards Torah. So they're both for 50 characters and never breaks. And then in the middle of the book, every 50th letter spells YHYW, Yahweh.
No
it says
way.
The Torah always points to God and it doesn't break the pattern once. Every 50 letters for tens of thousands of characters, which is crazy. It says the Torah always points to God.
Yeah. That's nuts.
Which is wild. That's a wild scripture fact.
Yeah.
And you just won't get that in our scriptures, which is interesting. Let's get back to the fighting. I know you talked about having major anger problems and getting into a lot of fights. I do want to know how you were delivered from that, but can you just dive deeper in that and childhood and why do you think you got in a lot of fights?
Yeah, I think it was definitely a cultural thing. It was like if you have a problem, we didn't use words. Like even you can ask my roommates, I'm still working on how to use words. So there are always times where we'll have like, and this doesn't happen a lot, but we'll have a disagreement and I'll have to take like 3 hours to just sit and process. And then I'll be like, hey, Bryce, like, I'm sorry this happened. You know, and it's so funny because he's already moved on, but I'm sitting there, I'm like, how do I say these words? And so I love my dad. He became a Christian 2.5 years ago. He's changed, but he was honestly a really, really bad person growing up. I was very abused growing up, and it was mainly physically and verbally. And with that, it like, all I knew was anger because all he knew was anger. And so you learn from your father. That's why God is called our fathers, because you learn from your father. And so all I knew, this sounds crazy, but it's a huge reason why I started writing actually, is because up until September, I would consider myself a borderline sociopath. Like I had very little emotions until September of this year, of the one that just passed.
2023.
Yeah, 2023. And why I bring that up is because when I became a Christian, I didn't have this crazy anger anymore, but I didn't have this emotional like happiness that everyone feels in their heart, or like I didn't miss people until November of this year. And just stuff of that, because from the age of 9, I've lost people to gun violence and suicide.
Yeah.
And so it was a mix of the abuse at home, but also just like literally survival of the fittest lifestyle, where it was like, I was born 2 months early, so I was always super, super small. I was 90 pounds in 7th grade, so I just got bullied a lot. And from there, it was like, I either defend myself and make myself scary to other people, or I get beat up and I don't learn. And so I ended up becoming a bully and becoming someone who was just awful to people, because it was safer for me than to accept defeat every single day. And that started by in kindergarten or in 1st grade. That first year, I got beat up on a school bus by 5th graders. And after that, that's when I started fighting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dang. Bro, that's so different from my childhood.
Yeah.
I mean, I grew up in a pretty wealthy place, and no one fought each other. And when they did fight each other, it was maybe once a year, and it was the most exciting thing because no one saw fights.
Yeah.
And so when I have friends who've had similar testimonies. It almost seems like that culture doesn't exist in America from my perspective. It just, fighting wasn't a thing. I mean, we had our own problems. In 4th grade, my grade school had a school shooting.
Wow.
That was before Parkland or anything else. So that was like a wild experience. But it is just different it's interesting how like different people just have completely different worlds upbringing wise.
Wow.
But you had talked about how you either kind of get bullied, or you either do the bullying or get the bullying.
Yeah.
And I was very, very small, and I played football. I was the smallest kid on the football team and got bullied a lot. No one beat me up, but just a lot, butt of every joke and kind of stuff. And I realized, or I subconsciously put it together in my head, that the popular kids were the ones who picked on others. And so much like you, not in a physical way, but I would make fun of other people because I associated that with being cool. I didn't even realize that was why I did it, but I was like, oh, cool people are funny, and funny people are the ones who make others the butt of the joke. And to this day, like when I think about the worst things I've ever done, and I know like Jesus forgives me and stuff, but the things I struggle with most are because of that pattern. Because I wanted to be cool to other people, and I thought cool was being funny, and I thought being funny was putting others down, and just where that took me in some places was awful. So I mean, I definitely cannot relate to your story, but in that aspect, I can relate.
I want to just encourage you with that. I've had friends, well, they weren't my friends, but I have had people that I treated horribly growing up see my videos, and they've messaged me and they'd be like, hey, I see how you're changing. Like, I just want to say, like, this is changing my heart. Like, I want to give Jesus a try. And so even with it, like, you doing what you're doing can impact them without you even knowing it.
It's funny because there is like a specific situation I think of in my head where like I did something, I'm going to say on this podcast, but I did something really mean to two people. And I think about them a lot, and sometimes I pray for them. It's not like a super common thing, but I was driving here just listening to worship music, and I literally was thinking like, I need to invite them to church.
Wow.
Not from like, I invite a lot of people to church just because I have good social skills, and it's like pretty easy for me to invite people to church. But I felt like a need to invite them, almost like I had to pay them back for what I did. Like, oh, I did this really mean act to them, so therefore like I owe them my best attempt at getting them saved. Which I don't actually know if that's a good thought or a bad thought, because in a sense it's like I think in a sense it's a good thought because you're like, oh, I want to introduce new people to Jesus.
Yeah.
But in a sense it's a bad thought because it's almost like I need to forgive my own sins rather than Jesus. It's like, oh, I was, that just like hit me as I was talking to you. I was like really feeling like, oh, I have to get these people to know Jesus because I was so mean to them. But I don't know if that's a good or bad thought.
I don't know either. I think even if it was a bad thought, you can now use it for good.
Yeah.
Like, oh wait, actually I get to love them and I get to ask them to come to church because I want them to know God. And even something that I've seen change people is repenting to them. Just be like, hey, I want to do this to some people in my life that I'm going back to Washington in like a month or so, and I want to just do it. It's just, hey, I'm so sorry for what I did. Like listing out what I did and saying, I just want you to know you don't have to forgive me, but I knew that I could not live another day without saying sorry because Jesus forgave me, and he wants me to ask you for forgiveness.
Yeah, that's really good. I definitely have a couple people on that list that I should do that too. Well, now let's talk about how did Jesus deliver you from that anger and that lifestyle?
Dude. Yeah.
You feel free to go as deep or as shallow as you'd like.
Yeah. How did he free me from it? He showed me that love was the only answer to everything.
And how were you even introduced to Jesus?
Yeah. So obviously I didn't grow up Christian. I grew up agnostic, just thinking that there might be a God, but actually similar to you, I was going to talk to you about it after the podcast, but a big part of my story is I went through a school shooting.
Oh,
and
really?
It's actually like a huge reason I'm alive is because something about Native American reservations is natives are 70% more likely to commit suicide than any other race.
Natives?
Yeah, Native Americans.
Wow.
And I really believe it's demonic. Like,
I did not know that.
Yeah. And so I've had people commit suicide since I was 9 years old. And so I really found this like deep hatred for people and for God from a young age because I was like, if there's a God out there, he hates me. Like, why would he take away my best friends? And so when I was 13 years old, one of my closest friends died in our school shooting, and it was so hard, bro. But that day when I found out she died, I told myself, I said, I'm going to live every day for her, and I'm not going to commit suicide because I want her name to live on.
Yeah.
And, now I live on for Jesus, but I really believe he used her death to help me sustain life with just living in general, because my mind was so, like, I was at war every day. I literally, this sounds crazy, but there were days where I legit saw and heard demons telling me to kill myself. And I would just be in my room just tormented, like walking back and forth, just like, should I do it today? Should I do it today? Should I do it today? And when I was 16, it was the first time I ever heard about Jesus. I didn't know he died for me. I just heard that this girl that I was dating, I went to church. And with that, I told her I didn't want anything to do with any religion, that she can have fun with it, but I'll do my own thing. She does her own thing.
Yeah.
And 2 years later, I just had this crazy encounter with, I believe she was an angel. This lady walked up to me and asked if she could pray for me, and she legit prayed over every single thing I had ever gone through. Like, named my friend that died in the shooting by name, named 9 people that died that year by name. She said, no matter what you've gone through, God has been with you, and he wants you to read the Bible. I was like, all right, whatever, I'll pick up the Bible.
Wait, so you're telling me you're walking whatever one day and some girl comes up to you and she starts naming your...
She was like, hey, can I pray for you, bro?
Yeah. And so you're like, okay, whatever. And then she's...
The only reason I let her is because so in my head, there were probably like 5 Christians in my hometown, and they were all awful people besides the girl I was dating and her friends.
And the girl you were dating, just to jump in here, was she like a Christian because her parents were a Christian, or
I believe she was saved. Yeah. So that's the funny thing is I think she dated me because, so even though by that point I was basically done fighting. I was 15. I was trying to get out of that lifestyle. So I still, a big part of my story was I stole and I fought.
Yeah.
And so I was still stealing because it was all I knew, but I wasn't fighting anymore.
Yeah.
And with that, she, I think it was just because most of my friends and people that, like 90% of my school were on drugs and alcohol and, all of that stuff. And like, I was honestly at a point where I was like, I didn't know how to trust people. So I wouldn't, like, there were girls that tried to have sex with me or do things and I would just say no. And it was like the opposite. Everyone always thinks the guy is trying to get on the girls. But for me, it was like, I didn't want those things. And so for her, it was like, I was one of the only guys in our town that probably didn't want to have sex with her. And so.
Oh, so she was like a genuine Christian, but you were not necessarily what she was looking for.
Yeah.
But you were what she was looking for.
Yeah.
That's really interesting.
And maybe I'm wrong. If she
it's just like,
she can correct me. But
bro, come on the pod. No, I'm just kidding. But that's a very interesting story, just with her and coming into your life. Also, the girl praying over you. So, I mean, just to give you some background, I'm Christian my whole life.
Yeah.
Never, up until like 6 months ago. Oh yeah, I would say that. I was Christian because my parents were Christian my whole life.
Yeah.
I'd say about 2 years ago, I actually became a Christian, serving the Bible, started like my own faith. But up until like maybe 4 months ago, I never thought about denomination once.
Wow.
Like, I knew the word denomination. I thought Catholic, Christian, Mormon.
No way.
This is people who read the Bible. I'm not Catholic. I'm not Mormon. I'm a Christian. And I just never thought about denomination. I don't know. The churches I went to didn't have a denomination in the title.
Yeah.
But what I'm realizing is that pretty much all churches I've been to, probably because of my parents, were on the less charismatic side.
Yeah.
So not much like prophecy or Holy Spirit's definitely like talked about. Not much prophecy, not much instantaneous healing. Actually, my favorite church right now is this church in San Diego called College Ave, but it was College Ave Baptist Church. And my favorite pastor in the world, other than Tim Keller, who died, he doesn't believe in apostolic miracles at all. So I've just never been on this like side of Christianity. And I'm a firm believer in like not harping over small issues because like if we both follow Christ, the real Christ, I wouldn't say I was on the same team as Mormon because I don't believe they follow the real Christ.
Amen.
But like if someone like me who's less charismatic and a charismatic person were like same team, but I'm taking so long to explain a small thing. But then I went to Creator Camp. I talked to all these people about Jesus. I met this spiritual girl, Sky, and she's made videos in other religions with like witches, with all these people, and I really didn't even want to talk to her, but I was like, I don't want to talk to this girl because she's not about what I'm about, and like her content's kind of scary. Yeah. But people kept telling me to talk to her. They're like, you'll have such a good religion conversation. So I ended up talking to her because I came to my head and I was like, dude, Jesus is the ultimate power. There's nothing to be scared of. Yeah. So I talked to her and we had a really good conversation, and she said that her audience wanted her to make a video about Jesus, and she was like, I need help. And so I was like, sure, I'll help you make a video about Jesus. I was like, this is really seems ordained by God. Yeah. But she was trying to find a way to make a YouTube video about Jesus where she could genuinely explore, and I believed her heart was there, where she could genuinely explore, but her spiritual audience would still be receptive to it. And what she came was miracle healings. Like, does Jesus really heal people? Yeah. And I was like, dude, I don't know, because my sect of Christianity never, like, it's not even talked about. Like, I just don't even know. And so they went down a, like, through the process of that, I went down this whole rabbit hole, and I saw, like, in the video, she went to Bethel. Oh, wow. And I didn't go because all my friends were like, don't go to Bethel. I don't know. To this day, I don't really know. There was another church in LA called F5. Okay. In F5, dude, the Instagram's wild. Okay. I don't want to say for a fact it's fake, but it's like people coming on stage and then the pastor prays over them and they start like having seizures. It seems very, very sus. Yeah. But then through that, I started kind of finding people who had very legitimate healing stories. I met this guy, Chuck Keels, who was healed instantaneously of cancer. He had cancer in 90% of the bones in his body. Wow. He has the scams. His bones crumbled under his body weight. His spine broke. Jeez. And then he was healed. He went from cancer in 90% of his bones to 0 cancer cells and no damage in his spine. He has all the proof for it. Jeez. So it's like I'm seeing these miracles and really interesting. But this is all just like I'm just sharing my thoughts with you so you can understand, because now I'm hearing I've had people prophesy over me where they like come and pray over me, and they didn't say anything crazy, and I thought like, oh, that seems accurate, but I've never like, sometimes I hear these stories where it's like, oh, someone comes up to me and they like list 10 or they list who died in real life and this and this. And I'm like, whoa, that's like, it's just interesting how I can be so deep. I believe that I'm very deep in my faith. I read the Bible every morning, and you can be so deep in your faith, but the experiences are so
100%.
different. I'm just curious if you have thoughts on that.
Yeah, I agree. You know what's funny is when I first, even after that experience, because I accepted Jesus that night, I read the Bible very quickly, because I was like, if I want to tell people about this God, then I need to know his word, and I need to be just encapsulated by this. And so I started going to, it's funny because I accepted Jesus, and then a week later, me and that girl broke up. Yeah. And we're still friends to this day. Yeah. But I really believe the Lord used her and her family in my life to introduce me to the love of God, to like soften my heart, to allow someone to pray for me. And we dated for 3 years. Wow. And so with that, for the first 2 years of being a Christian, I didn't believe in the gifts. I believe in them now.
Elaborate on the gifts for them.
Yeah. So gifts in the Bible, there's in 1 Corinthians primarily, and then onward, and in Acts. 1 Corinthians 12 through 14 talks about these spiritual gifts. And so basically there's prophecy, which the Greek word in the New Testament mainly means encouragement. Yeah. So it means like encouragement of the soul. It's reading of the soul. It's like Matthew 6 talks about how the eyes are the window to the soul. And so it shows that since the God of the universe lives inside of us, in our soul, then he can tell us what is going on in another person's soul, because he knows everything. So that's prophecy. Then there's healings, which are miraculous healings. So let's say my friend Ozzy here had like a broken arm. I believe that it could get healed right now in the name of Jesus. Yeah. Look, it's healed. Yeah. And so that's healing. And then there's a lot of other things that I
think like peace, joy, those are fruits.
Yeah, fruit of the Spirit.
I believe there's 9. I just saw that on some quiz, but
so there's a bunch of these things that are gifts, and to me, how I see it is a gift is given. And so God gives us these gifts for things. It's like when I have a Christmas present, I get a gift to use for certain things. And so with it, how I see it is spiritual gifts, these things, whatever you want to call it, whether you believe in them or not, is to bring forth the love of Jesus. So I believe certain things happen certain times because of the love of Jesus. And someone's first question is going to be, well, why doesn't someone always get healed? Yeah. My answer to that is because I have seen people get healed that did not accept Jesus into their hearts. Yeah. And why I say that is because just because someone gets healed doesn't mean that they experience the love of God. And so the God of the universe knows what every single person needs. Yeah. He knows I needed someone to say every single thing in my life to happen for me to accept Jesus, because I had to see something undeniable. But he knows some people need this love that comforts over time. Like there's people that I walk with in LA where it's like, I'll just see them once a week and I'll just be like, hey, I just want you to know that God loves you. Like he wants you to know that you're seen and you're loved and you're valued. It's taken 6 months and now they're like, hey, I want to accept Jesus. And so it's like understanding that God uses certain things for certain people and certain times.
That's good. I also think, kind of playing off what you said, that God uses what you need. In the Bible, when the pagan astrologers had read in the Old Testament, they had read about a prophecy of this star being above Jesus, and they came to someone in the Bible, and they were like, what is a star? The star of David, wherever. and God used a star, and he brought the star above Jesus's manger, and all those pagan astrologers gave their life to Christ because what they were looking for was a star, and God spoke to them in that form. And it's like some people want a more emotional story. For me, I was really, really big on apologetics because I was a skeptic, and I had issues with like how could one religion be right and another be wrong, and the morality of it. And I feel like God provided, like Tim Keller's my favorite pastor ever. He's one of the best apologists in the world. So is my pastor at home. And so like that is what helped me. I don't even know if I got a miracle healing, I might have just been like, oh my gosh, I got a healing. That's so cool.
Yeah.
So what?
Literally.
Like, happens.
Yeah.
But, and so God, I also know, like going off this, I have friends who are missionaries in the Middle East and the missionaries around the world, and way more people in the Middle East, like astronomically more people in the Middle East have dreams of Jesus. Yeah. It's I don't know if I've ever heard someone here have a dream of Jesus, but there it's super common. Yeah. And it's like, but those people, they need something bigger because they've been taught a religion that from their childhood that's like ingrained in them. Yeah. So it makes sense that there would be more miracles, there would be more dreams over there because they need that. The other thing too is I was reading this part, Deuteronomy 31:21, the second half of that verse, it says, it's talking about right before the people enter their promised land, and God says, he's basically, it's in a part of the Bible called the Song of Moses, and Moses is singing this song, and he says that the people of Israel are going to go in the promised land, but they're still going to betray him. And he says, when great disasters come down upon them, this song will stand as evidence against them, for it will never be forgotten by their descendants. And it says, I know the intentions of these people, even now before they enter the land I swore to give them. So he's giving them the promised land because he promised that he would give it to them, and God never breaks his promises. But he's saying that even now, before you getting the gift that I'm giving you, I know that you're going to turn against me. I know your intentions. And Chuck Heels, that guy who's healed from cancer, he grew up Catholic and kind of strayed away from the religion. I don't want to boof his story, but from my understanding of his story, when he was in his like stage 4 cancer and he was basically on his deathbed, he didn't have much of a relationship with God. Yeah. He grew up Catholic, didn't have much of a relationship. I'm sure because he was like days away from dying, he was probably praying to God. For sure. But yet God, no one prayed over him either. Wow. Jesus walked into his hospital bed where he claims someone walked in his bed. He didn't think it was Jesus. They put their hand on his shoulder. He telepathically heard, you're in the presence of Jesus, and he was instantly healed, and the guy disappeared. And in his story, it's like, well, why would... also, so he married, in his stage 4 cancer, he married another girl at stage 4 cancer. The girl he married died, and he was instantly healed. So it's like, why wasn't the girl who was like more devout Christian, why wasn't she healed? And why is he healed? Like, it's very interesting, but when I think about that quote, I know the intentions of these people even now before they enter the land I swore to give them. It's like Chuck Heels went on to quit his job, create a van, and he literally travels around the U.S. telling his story like 2 to 3 times a day to people. Far. His whole life is dedicated to telling people about Jesus. And I think God knew his intentions even before he healed it. Yeah. And it's like everything is for the glory of God. And when you understand that death isn't final, then it really changes the perspective of anything. There was a very famous Christian missionary, I forgot his name, but he wanted to go preach the gospel to this tribe it was a tribe that was like still hunted their food, ran around with like cloths around their genitals, like literally one of the only tribes left in the world that has no technology. And he basically went to preach the gospel to this tribe, and he was speared in the chest and killed. Wow. And it's like, well, why didn't God protect him or like give him the ability to talk to this tribe? And like, I don't know for sure. I don't want to act like I know why God makes his decisions, but that story of him getting martyred has been talked about in so many churches in so many ways that he might have preached the gospel to those 20 people and he could have reached 20 people, but the fact that he died, he's glorifying God globally because his story is recognized. And it's like, that's like, well, then though if the wrong person hears what I'm saying, they're going to think, well, God's so selfish. Like, why would he let this person's death? But you got to understand, death is not death.
Yeah.
That guy's going to enjoy a way better eternity more quickly.
Yeah.
Me and my friends have a joke that's messed up, but we always like, whenever there's a death situation, we just say like, it's just expedited shipping because you're going to be with the Lord.
True.
And, but so it's like from that perspective, if you just don't think of death as like death, it's like that situation was more glorifying for the Lord. And it's just interesting to think, and we can't always understand God. I think that's something like I try to do so hard, and it's a good practice, but we won't always understand the purpose of everything on this side.
Yeah.
Earth.
Jeez.
So where else? Where do we go from here? A lot covered. Okay. Well, I guess the natural follow-up question is then when you became a Christian, how did you go from not believing in the fruits to believing in the fruits?
Yeah. So a big reason I didn't was because it was the church I went to taught me not to, and that it was wrong.
Oh, so, and when you say they taught you not to, I'm jumping in just to clarify, because at my church, it was never like taught.
Yeah.
It was just not really a thing.
Yeah.
But I do know that at some churches, they'll straight up teach that that's like false.
So yeah, they taught me it was false.
Okay.
And just the pastors that I would watch taught me it was false. And I still watch them. I love them. I love their teachings. But what I realized is I believed something because of that. And then also so six months into being a Christian is when COVID hit.
Yeah.
I started talking about Jesus on social media. And then a year into being a Christian, I started getting asked to speak at churches and stuff.
Yeah.
And so there was this one church that, I won't say their names or anything, but I went there and they knew that I didn't believe in the gifts. One of my friends told them because he believed in the gifts.
Yeah.
And
dang, he set you up.
they were an extreme group though, where they believed like if you don't speak in tongues and stuff of that stuff, then you're not saved. And I want to make something clear. I don't believe that.
Yeah.
I think that is a very big lie that Satan is trying to implement because he wants us to fall into a works-based salvation.
Yeah.
And it really hurts my heart. Yeah. And so I was told that night after they prayed over me for 2 hours to receive tongues that I wasn't saved.
That's wild.
Yeah. And I was
what's described in the Bible.
Yeah. Yeah. And I became very hardened to the idea of the gifts. And one day I moved to Georgia about a year and a half after that, and we just had this insane encounter. It's actually why I have this tattoo.
Yeah.
You don't have to believe me. I don't really care because I have 5 friends that were there with me.
Yeah.
But long story short, it is a really cool story that we can talk about.
I mean, the angel who said everyone who died was pretty convicting, but
yeah.
I'm curious how well this one will stand with.
So what we would do is we'd put on these worship events, and we would have 300 people come, me and my friends from social media. And a night before one of them, we were all worshiping in Georgia at this park in the middle of the woods. And it rained that day, and we were going to have a bonfire.
Yeah.
And so I'm from Washington. We love making bonfires. Yeah. We bring all the good stuff just so it's easy. All we had was wood and wet paper. And I was like, bruh,
what do you mean wet paper?
Because we tried to put it in, and then it just got soggy because the fire pit was wet.
Okay.
And so we didn't have, and we had 2 matches, and we burnt them out in the first 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And so we were like, hey, girls, you guys go back. It's 20 minutes drive out, 20 minutes back to get paper and everything. And so we're just sitting there, and me and my friend, one of my friends started believing in the gifts, and he was telling us all these stories, and we're like, okay, yeah, sure, whatever.
Yeah.
And so he had been telling us the stories a few days prior, and we're sitting around the just wet wood, and we're just sitting there. One of my friends is starting to play worship music on the guitar. One of my friends looks at us. He's like, what if we pray that the fire would start? And I was like, oh, okay, Zach, we'll pray that the fire starts.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And so he starts actually praying over it. I'm like, this guy's
Yeah.
this guy's an idiot. Like, sure, the fire's going to start, buddy. Like, whatever you say. And so about 20 minutes passes, and he, like, is aggravated. He's like, you guys need to pray with me. I believe it's going to start. I was like, okay, fine. I'll pray with you if it makes you feel better.
Yeah.
So we're sitting there praying. And I don't know why, but we're like, half of us are praying, and then the other half, like, out loud, and then the other half is, there's like 5 of us, and then the other half are like blowing on it with, there's no fire, there's no spark or anything. We're just blowing like on the wood, on wet wood. And 20 more minutes pass. The girls are coming up. They're like, it's a super long road, so you can see them like a quarter mile down the road. And as they start to pull up, my friend Zach, he stands up and he screams. He's like, if God can move mountains, like, screams at the top of his lungs. He says, if God can move mountains, he can surely start this fire. And it legit blows up in our face. And we just start running around it in a circle, bro.
Wow. That's crazy, bro.
Yeah.
Dang. Well, yeah, those are wild stories for me. But I'm trying to not when I hear these things, get in a habit of, I never want to be in the habit of assuming something's real.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to, like, if someone comes up and tells me, like, oh, some Jehovah's Witness tells me, oh, the Father did this for me or something. But then I also don't want to ever get in the habit of doubting God. Yeah. So I just take stories and I listen to them, and then later, as I get to know someone, their character, I decide.
I love that.
But I've always been a skeptic, so that part's not hard. But what I'm trying to get better is just not doubting, because God really can do anything. Yeah. And it's actually funny, because I used to be I wanted to make it on YouTube so bad, and like, all these self-help books will tell you got to believe it. You got to believe it. Work hard, believe it. So I'd read all these David Goggins, read these books, and try to believe it. I used to do the formula from Think and Grow Rich. I would look in my mirror. Yeah. And there's literally a formula in Think and Grow Rich, how you achieve money or whatever. Interesting. And I'd be like, basically, it's a date and time and what you give up. So I'll be like, I'll get 1 million subscribers on this date by this time. I will give up wasted time with my friends and my phone, and I'll get these subscribers. And I would say this every night in my mirror. And I think, like, I did start to believe that I would become successful on YouTube, but it's funny because actually when I, like, realized that YouTube was an idol for me and I gave it to God, I actually had way more belief in myself and my career, because I was just thinking, like, okay, God, you take the reins, you take control of my YouTube channel, my podcast, of everything. Yeah. And it's like, if God made the earth, like, all this nature you see, and he made the heaven and the stars and the humans with billions of cells, then, like, if he wanted to do something crazy in my podcast career, that would be, like, the least oppressive thing he could do. Wow. And it's funny, I'm introducing it to you this way, but the way I usually introduce this idea is I'll tell people, I wouldn't be surprised if I did a podcast in space, or I wouldn't be surprised if I did the first podcast with Kim Jong-un. Yeah. People laugh and they go, well, like, and I go, I know, because from a human perspective, it makes no sense, but I'm just saying, I don't even care about doing a podcast in space, nor would I want to do a podcast with Kim Jong-un. Neither of those sound appealing. But I just picked the most absurd things, because I'm like, if God wanted me to do those things, then it would happen. Yeah. Because it's out of everything he's done, that's, like, not even slightly impressive compared to the other stuff he said. So it's like, he really can do anything with my career. And so I have way more, now that I stopped, like, trying to believe in myself, I have way more belief in myself, because it's just like, it's God and whatever he wants to do, that it's crazy. Yeah. Wow.
That's the upside down kingdom.
Yeah. It's interesting.
Putting yourself down.
Is there anything else you want to discuss within the book?
Oh, man.
You don't have to give too much of it away. I know it's a small book. Let's see if I flip to something random. All right. Lights against light.
That's what we were talking about earlier.
Lights against light. Oh, I remember I was reading the list of the chapters, and I thought that was very interesting. Yeah.
So it's the concept of him using the lights. I want to throw Christians against.
I'm going to ask you about a random chapter.
Cool.
Let's see. Okay, there's 15 chapters. I want to do one we haven't covered yet. Work to death. I guess since my concept deals a lot with success and not idolizing work, let's talk about chapter 13, work to death.
Yeah.
What does it mean? Also, just for a close-up shot of the book. See, all right. Yeah. What is work to death about?
Yeah, so there's a concept in the Bible that changed my life, and it's John 15. It talks about if you abide in me, then I in him. So it's this thought of if we abide in Jesus, but like he is the tree, or he is the branch, we are the vine.
Yeah.
Then what that means is if we understand our identity in him, if we do all things through him, then we'll realize that our actual identity is meant to be rest. It's not meant to be work. And why I say that is because I found this out actually I think about a month and a half ago, and that's actually a huge reason why I wrote this chapter, is the Hebrew word for work and rest is the same.
The Hebrew word for work and rest is the same.
Yeah. Like when it relates to working and resting, or sorry, work and worship, not rest, sorry, work and worship. And why that's so important is because it shows that we were meant, our work was always meant to be worship, and that everything we were always supposed to do is supposed to be worship unto God. And so in America, we've been taught like, okay, well, I'm going to work to get this next thing. Oh, I got this thing. Well, I guess I'll work to get the newer version of this thing, or I'll work to impress my friends, or I'll work to get these things for this girl, or all of these things. And if you just sit and think about it for a moment, you realize that you're working all of these things for temporal satisfaction. A book that I'll probably write in the next year, if not next 2 years, it'll be called The Wage Dilemma. And so it's this construct that we work because our instinct is to know that to get something, you have to sacrifice another thing. That's something that, like, whether you realize it or not, like us right now, we're sacrificing time to talk right now.
Yeah.
You drove 2 hours to sacrifice that to formulate a podcast. And so everything you do, you sacrifice things. You sacrifice money to pay for food. You sacrifice time to make money. Every single thing in this world takes a sacrifice.
Yeah.
And so with that, we work ourselves to death by sacrificing time and money, and do this repetition, a cycle of literally, okay, if I make enough money, then I'll pay these wages. But the wage dilemma is you can make as much money, you can do as many good deeds as you want in this world, you can do as much, but you can't pay it enough for eternity. And so it's this thought that Jesus had to die because he paid the eternal wage. And that wage was death, because something that we cannot deny is every person will die. Like, you can't look at me and tell me.
Brian Johnson.
Yeah.
No, I'm just kidding. I hope someone gets that reference.
And with it, it's like,
I actually like Brian Johnson, but I like his health tips. That's like he needs to find Jesus.
Yeah. But it's this thought that no matter who you are, no matter how good of a person or anything, you will die one day.
Yeah.
And if that's the end, that's really weird to me, because we're different than any other species on this earth. Like, we have a moral compass.
Yeah.
Nothing else does. And so with it, there's a dilemma where the patient is told to work for these things, to pay for things for the girl or for the people around him, and because then he'll be known and he'll shine in front of people, and he'll become his own light in the midst of that. And so that's something that I've come to in my own heart. It's like, God, if I'm posting for the money, or even with this book, it's like, if I'm doing it to make a quick buck, like, it's wrong. And there's something that I need to search in my heart and see, like, all I was made to do is worship God.
Yeah.
And if there's people watching this that don't know God, understand that we both can attest we didn't worship God our whole lives.
Yeah.
Like, I was 18 when I accepted Jesus, and with that, I wanted nothing to do with worshiping God. That was the last thing I thought I would ever do, and so with it, I realized though that was our identity, because whether you want to admit it or not, you will worship a God, whether it's the God of the universe or the gods that will perish with this universe.
Yeah. Wow.
And so with it, you're sacrificing everything.
Yeah.
You have to sacrifice something for another thing. And that's what work to death is he sacrificing his life for death without realizing it.
It's very good. It's very on brand. Did this camera turn off? This camera's on. Hopefully we have most of the audio, or we'll at least have that camera. What was I going to say? We gotta zone in. Work it out. Okay. Yeah, so you were talking about with the book wanting to make a quick buck or wanting to worship God with it. This is a very interesting concept to me because I definitely haven't had any audible experience with God, but recently, for the past few months, I felt that there will be a time where I will sit with some of the biggest podcasters in the world and I will get to tell them about Jesus. And I have this feeling that will happen. Again, the reason I'm bringing it up is because I don't actually know if that's like I've always struggled with pride. I've always wanted to be the center of attention. I wanted to be a YouTuber, and then I found Christ and I changed my route, but I stayed on YouTube. Yeah. And I had a lot of suspicion of, is changing my route just reforming my pride in a different way, or is it actually for God? Yeah. And like I said, when I started this podcast, I really didn't know, but then after like things happened, I felt like God was blessing it. And it's funny because this kind of new thing I'm seeing where I picture myself talking to these great big creators and getting to talk about God. I still don't know. Is it for me or is it for God? It's not like I don't have a conviction that it's wrong at all, but I also don't have a conviction that it's right. Yeah. And I always like pray to God, like, this is what I feel. I don't know if it's from you or if it's not from you, but I just pray, like, come into my heart. First of all, get rid of my pride, because something I also want to talk about is that pride, sometimes I feel, and maybe other people do this, that pride is a situation. Like, oh, if I'm talking in front of a bunch of people on stage, that's pride. But it's not. Pride will be in your heart regardless if you get the success or not. If you struggle with pride, it's going to come out. Yeah. I do think that the enemy will leverage success to bring out your pride. Yeah. But so first of all, I pray like, God, please get rid of my pride. But second of all, I just pray like, God, I don't know if this is from you, but like come into my life and have your way. Just have your way, because and I think that's very interesting, because you were talking about this book, and it's clear I feel that the book is for God, but I don't know if you like, do you always feel a clear conviction that what you're doing is for God, or do you sometimes not know? Because I feel like a lot of times I don't know, and I gotta just take that step in faith. Yeah. Yeah. Well, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I've two thoughts with it. Love hopes all things. Yeah. So with that, it's been a kick I've been on, is when I do something, I'm going to, rather than fall into this like continual battle in my mind where I'm like, am I doing it for God? Am I not doing it for God? What am I doing? How do I know if I'm doing it for God? I hope all things. So I hope that God put it on my heart to do for a reason. And with that, I hope that I do it for God. Yeah. And so instead of, what I do now is, instead of questioning my own motives, I sit and I hope that my motives are the best. Yeah. And if not, I know that the Lord will correct me in the midst of that. And what's been cool is, even with this book,
so when you say I hope that my motives are correct,
yeah,
sorry to cut you off.
No,
that's to go deeper.
Yeah.
How is that like a biblical concept?
Yeah.
Because couldn't I just be like, oh, I'm gonna go hook up with this chick, and I hope my motives are correct?
Yeah. So I think, what I do is, even with this book, what's been cool is, even with this book, 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 even I think with that, you search your own heart.
Yeah.
And so you ask the Lord to search your heart. You don't search your own heart. You ask the Holy Spirit. You say, search my heart, O Lord. That's what King David did in Psalm 51.
Yeah.
And so with it, you say, God, I know that love hopes all things. So inside of my heart, if I search my heart with God, then that means I am striving to be a son listening to his father. And so what that means is I'm hoping that every creative thought, every just thought that isn't sin related, I'm hoping that those are from God, if that makes sense. And so it's changing the narrative of expecting myself to sin and actually anticipating to walk in love instead of in walking in a sound mind instead of a spirit of fear.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's good. That's really good.
Yeah.
Because you're going to say something with the book. I cut you off. Whatever. Not important. Yeah.
But it's this thought that like, oh, well, like even with the book, a big desire of mine is, and yeah, I've been telling people this. I genuinely want this book to sell 1 million copies.
Yeah.
Because I want to be able to look at people, and I talk. One of my favorite things in the world is I talk to a lot of homeless people.
Yeah.
I'll just sit with them for hours, and something that really burdens me is not being able to, like, buy them an apartment for a month or something.
Yeah.
And I really like, one of my biggest desires with the Lord is having money to be able to just, if I want, just say, hey, you need rent for this month, here, just have it. Or, hey, I overheard this person needs a car, just give it to them and not have a single person know about it. And so with it, I've sat with the Lord and I've consulted. That's why I waited so long. The book was finished a while ago, but I sat with the Lord to make sure he searched my heart to make sure my motives were pure. And I sat and I was like, God, is it pure that I do this, or is it pure that I share this? Do you want me to share this? Do you want me to say this? And just making sure I do things and ask the Lord his ideology with it. Ask him, because he's the best teacher.
Yeah.
And so with that, for me, I grew up very against God. So with that, I heard all of these other voices besides God's voice my entire life.
Yeah.
So when I met God, I could tell his voice instantaneously because it was the exact opposite of all the voices I heard growing up. Like, now when I look at you, I want to love you because God has taught me his voice and taught me, he's put his eyes on my gaze. And so it's like, wow, I actually love Ozzy. It was never my intent, or I was never designed to hate. I was never designed to want things for myself. And so with it, when you search your heart, you say, oh wait, God's thoughts are patient, they're kind, they're soft-spoken, they're not prideful, they're not arrogant, they're forgiving. And I when I do something big or something important or even just everyday life choices, I ask myself before doing it, or even if I talk to someone, because like living in LA, you talk to so many people in the industry. It's like, I'll sit there and I'm like, what are the motives here? Are they patient? Are they kind? Are they to bring forth the gospel of Jesus Christ? Or are they to self-glorify Tanner? And just differentiating the two. Because if you see a narrative of this, the light, then you know that it's from God. If you see a narrative of darkness, then it's from the flesh, and it's a desire of the flesh.
That's so good. So interesting. Alex Eubank talks about how when discerning the voice of God, because a lot of people go, how do you hear the voice of God? And me too. I ask that question a lot because I'm so punctual and so literal and so like I'm an apologetic person that I want the audible voice of God. And most people don't get that.
Yeah.
And he said something that's really good, kind of related to what you said, is he said, if you get a no caller ID phone call and you pick up the phone and it's your mom's voice, you're going to recognize it because you've spent your whole life with your mom. You've probably taken 1,000 phone calls with your mom. So you know, oh, this is my mom. You don't need to be sus of the no caller ID.
Don't question it.
But if it's like some random friend from 3rd grade and you're just like, their voices change, you've never talked to them, you're like, who is this? The more you talk to God, the more you indulge in God, the more you begin to build up that resume so that when he does call, you can recognize the caller ID. And I thought that was a really good analogy.
That is really cool.
I'll ask you my outro question now, which is, when you die, what do you want people to say about you?
I love that question.
Yeah.
That's fire. I want people to say that he loved better than anyone else I know. And that in every single thing he did, he loved me well.
That's good. That's Jesus.
Yeah.
All right. Let's wrap it up, Tanner. Good episode. That was honestly great.
That was fun.
That was fun. Lot of fun.